Hello, I wish to continue my analysis of the Incipit of ANTI-OEDIPUS. This is Agent Swarm talking to you from Nice. In a moment, for once it'll be relevant why I specify from Nice, or maybe I can specify it now. The first sentence of the second paragraph talks about the promenade of the schizophrenic, and I'm 9 minutes away from the promenade des Anglais. So maybe I can work that into my commentary. This particular video is in dialogue with a video by Brooks and the Deleuze and Guattari Quarantine Collective that was just put up, which analyzes in painstaking and careful, in all senses, the second paragraph of ANTI-OEDIPUS. So what this video did for me when I listened to it, it inspired me to get down my thoughts. Also, because it's so careful and painstaking in comparing the two translations, I feel free of that task now, and I don't think that I'll talk much about comparative translation, although I will discuss the differences between French and English vocabulary a little. So the second paragraph begins, the promenade of the schizophrenic is a better model than the neurotic lying on the couch. There's already a lot packed into there, and Brooks discussed possible translations for promenade. Maybe the best is walk or stroll. An interesting thing is that promenade is a sort of orphan word in English. There's no direct brother or sister or parent word that goes with it. In French, promenade comes from se promener, to go for a walk, to stroll around. And it's very interesting, given the sort of verbal type of ontology that Deleuze and Guattari are putting forward, and that Deleuze was putting forward in Logic of Sense. It's interesting that promenade is a deverbal noun. It's a noun that's derived from a verb, se promener. So there are two senses. There's the actual place where you go for a promenade, and there's the activity of going on a walk or a promenade. So, for example, as I said, I live in Nice. The Promenade des Anglais is 5 minutes walk from my place, because I live quite near the port. So I can go on a promenade to the promenade if I want at any time. So the promenade of the schizophrenic is a better model than the neurosis lying on the couch. So a word that jumps out at you straight away is model, because anti-Oedipus means anti-method, and in a certain sense, anti-model, in terms of some sort of ideal that we're meant to imitate. But in fact, I think model there is an exemplar, one possible exemplar amongst many. So, in fact, if we look at the first paragraph, we're getting models from the very beginning. We're getting, well, they mention it as a model in a way, but it's a sort of dummy subject. They mention machines, but we're not getting much about them except that they're everywhere. But the models are the the mouth sucking at the breast, the anorexic's mouth. So we're getting sort of babies as a model outside the normative white adult male hardworking consumer that is a model in the normative sense today. So we're getting babies, anorexics. We get Schreiber, so we're getting paranoiacs or schizophrenic paranoiacs or paranoid schizophrenics. And because he can do the theory of his experiences, we're getting in the background theorists as possible models in the sense of systematic theorists, perhaps. So here we're saying implicitly as a sort of further step along that line, there are neurotics on couches, but a better model than the neurotics and probably than all that is a schizophrenic out on a stroll, or that's too thingy, or it's not the schizophrenic. The emphasis is on, as Brooks pointed out, we begin with la promenade du schizophrène. So what is foregrounded, is fronted in the sentence, is the activity, the promenade. So I commented in my first video, I think, that we're in a verbal ontology. Well, it's both verbal and nominal. Verbal is more the sort of free flowing and cutting virtual, and the nominal is more the solid reified state of the same things. And this interplay between fluid and solid, or virtual and actualized, is already at work here in these first two paragraphs. So it begins, it functions everywhere, sometimes without stopping, sometimes discontinuously. It breathes, it heats, it eats, and so on. We start with a pronoun and not a noun, it, which is it for the French and the Germans, but is the id in English. And it's immediately pluralized, and it seems to function as not even a real pronoun. It's sort of almost absorbed into the verb. It's a dummy subject that you need to be able to put a verb there. And similarly, we have the promenade beginning the second paragraph, and promenade, as I said, is a de-verbal noun. It's a noun that is derived from a verb. I'll continue. A little fresh air, a little relation with, a little fresh air, a relation with the outside. So first, I want to give 2 or 3 different elements of context there. One thing that is coming up recently is the relation between Deleuze and Guattari and the post-Jungian analyst, James Hillman. So I could say that I discovered James Hillman in 1977 or 78, and Anti-OEDIPUS a little later, a few months later, in 1978. And I've been reading and thinking about them together ever since. So for me, Hillman and Deleuze, they're not the same, but they're very, very close, in a close dialogue for me. And just a little quotation from Hillman's The Politics of Feeling. It begins, Hillman says that his concern is with moving psychology from being an interior, personal, what's wrong with me, how can I straighten out my inner child, to being something to do with real life. So we've got this interior, inside psychology, including psychoanalysis, that has to be moved outside. And that's the movement that they're evoking there. We could almost say that the first paragraph is, well, it's not unambiguously inside, but it's mainly internal. We're getting Schreiber with sun rays in his butt, but they're not fully envisaged as cosmic outside rays by the authors of Anti-OEDIPUS. So there is almost present a move in paragraph 1 to paragraph 2 from inside to outside. At least the outside now has been laid on the table, has become explicit. So the relation with the outside. One thing I want to say is that when I was in Paris, I went to Deleuze's seminars, and they were very interesting. And I was reading a Scottish poet, Kenneth White, who had actually worked with Deleuze and I think contributed to Deleuze's ongoing system, the notion of the nomad intellectual, or the intellectual nomad. And finally, after a few years of reading Kenneth White, I realized that he was in Paris too, and he was giving lectures at the Sorbonne that were more or less open to the public. I went to the first one, and there are 100 people, and I had to tell him why I wanted to attend. So I said that I was working on epistemological doctorate on epistemological and ontological pluralism in relation to Deleuze and Feyerabend, and he said, "That's it. That's your ticket. That's your passport for entry." And he authorized me to attend the class. But that's after the first 5 minutes. In the first 5 minutes of this first class I attended, there were 100 people. I had discovered the possibility of attending, I think in May. So it was a very hot day, and the windows were open, and it's in the middle of Paris 1, the Pantheon. So it's in the middle of Paris, and so there's a lot of noise. And Kenneth White arrived, and the first thing he said, it's really hot, but there's a lot of noise. So what do we do? Should we close the windows or close the shutters? It'll be hot, but we'll be able to hear. And there's a little discussion, and finally everyone decided to close the windows. And I thought, well, this is the poet of the outside, and his first act is to close the windows. But then that way we got to hear each other and hear his presentation, which was on the intellectual nomad. So I thought, with the shutters shut, we're more on the outside than with them open. We're more open to the outside than if we actually physically left the windows and shutters open. And that's an interesting thing, because Deleuze and Guattari, I think even then Guattari had a bad lung. So maybe they met outside a little to talk and go over manuscripts, but they were mostly inside doing research and writing. So it's not necessarily to be taken as a physical outside, although it's not detached from that either. It's primarily, in first instance, a noetic outside that we're talking about. And as to the relation with the neurotic on the couch, after a few weeks, somebody who was a bushwalker commented that she was in a club and that they walked in the mountains a lot, and that was far superior to psychoanalysis and to neurotics lying down on the couch. So I think that was, once again, taking things at the literal level of the physical outside is always and everywhere superior to the physical inside, when that's only one criterion in an array of criteria. And the second criterion was, no matter where you are, inside or outside, what is going on noetically? Are you in the space of machines linking up with the cosmos, or are you in the space of transporting your mother and father and your little Oedipus with you and saying, what a good person I am. I'm out walking around, far better than those silly people who are lying on a couch doing psychoanalysis, when many of them are probably going on a intensive voyage that is even more opening and more cosmic than many bushwalks. So this idea of it's not automatically physical, but it's noetic, must be taken itself with great wariness, because I'm not saying that it's metaphorical. We saw in the first paragraph that they say twice, this is not a metaphor, this is not a metaphor. And I think one interesting way to see what's going on there is that there is a sort of a vision. You could say a schizophrenic vision, or you could put it as Deleuze does, Deleuze and Guattari in What is Philosophy, I think. Vision with the capital V, where we've got a vision seeing through the ordinary world to the machines, seeing the machines under or behind or transfusing the ordinary world. So in fact, it's the ordinary world, what we take for everyday life, people under dominant categories and significations. That's the metaphor. And the machines is the reality behind the metaphor. At least that's a first step. We know that deterritorialization, like deconstruction, has a few steps to it. And the first step is isolating a binary. The second step is seeing that the binary is a not a symmetrical state between two opposing terms, but that one term is dominating the other term. The third step is provisionally valorizing, and so bringing up to a higher position, valorizing the dominated term, and let that transform and scramble and multiply the field. So the fourth step is not having sort of a dictatorship of the proletarian term, but opening things up to a plural and freer field. So, nonetheless, it's not metaphorical because it's machinic, and it's the non-machinic that is, if you will, provisionally to be labeled as the metaphor. For example, the promenade of Lens, reconstituted by Buchner. So we seem to be getting a similar example to the examples I've been taking out of the first paragraph. So we've got the baby's mouth, we've got the anorexic's mouth, which is already at a level of complexity and quantum indeterminacy more open and plural. And we've got the paranoiac instantiated in Schreber. And so we seem to be going to the schizophrenic, but the example given is not the schizophrenic, so to say, as such, but a highly mediated, if that's the right word, a highly transformed and reconstituted is their word, schizophrenic stroll, because there was a schizophrenic Lens who was sheltered in a vicarage by a pastor, and it's the pastor's diary, not the schizophrenic's diary or record, but it's the pastor's diary that wrote down what Buchner used to go further in an artistic reconstitution to get the schizophrenic and the promenade of the schizophrenic. So in a way, we're getting already getting both the here we can call it, of course, we're making a contrast, the physical walk of the schizophrenic and the role of art, the reconstitution, the affirmation that reconstitutes what it's affirming. It's different from the moments. We can think of dialectical moments as well, because what is pluralism but a deconstruction of dialectics, which means it doesn't erase the dialectic, but it multiplies the moments. So it's different from the moments where Lens se retrouve, refines himself. It could have been se trouve, finds himself, but it's se retrouve. Well, that's grammatically correct French, but there's this notion of finds himself back chez son bon pasteur, at his pastors, or if you want to keep the bon, at his good pastors. The bon there is almost diminutive in connotation, at his little pastor's place. So the chez, C-H-E-Z, is plunging us back into a static location. So the Lens, the schizophrenic, was on the move, and is that's so different from the moments where he's stopped in one place with the pastor. So that's the contrast I said between fluid, which is liquid and gaseous, and solid. Zizek, on a good day where he's not insulting Deleuze and Guattari with his quantum, is it a metaphor? His quantum model would say there's the sort of schizophrenic superposition, and then there's the quantum collapse. So the schizophrenic superposition is the stroll, where sort of all the states and intensities are possible, and the quantum collapse in being not just in any place, but in the pastor's place. So it's different from the moments where Lenz finds himself back at the little pastor's place, which forces him to localize himself socially in relation to the God of religion. The God of religion is, I think the translation says institutional religion. That's adding institutional, but it's makes me think of when Pascal died. They found sewed into his coat, or a sewed up pocket in his coat, prayer to God who is fire, the God of Abraham and the prophets, and not the God of the church. So here, because he's at the little pastor's place, he has to situate himself, position himself, place himself with respect to the God of the church, and not the God of fire and cosmicity that he can relate to on his stroll. So, which forces him to localize himself socially in relation to, I would say, the God of the church, that says the God of religion, in relation to father and mother. So we've got an image of, we haven't actually got to what the other thing is. We know it's a schizophrenic stroll, but we've got a system of coordinates, sort of rigid, almost Cartesian coordinates, where you can plot a point on the axes that relate it to the God, the Father, the Mother. It continues. There, on the other hand, or on the contrary, there when he's out on the stroll, there he is in the mountains under the snow with other gods, or without God at all. So there's the polytheism as opposed to monotheism with the other gods, and without a god at all. I personally find a hint that the God is too territorialized a word. The intensities are gods, and that's already a progress in the deconstruction of the monotheistic God. But it's something like when in the Kafka book, Deleuze and Guattari say that the short stories contain the animal becomings, but the animal at least the way it occurs in Kafka, is still too molar, still too formatted an entity, and you need to go further to the molecular. So it's a similar thing here. We know that they're going to say that the libido is also the noumen, the divine energy. So they're not getting rid of the divine, but Lenz is out in the mountains under the snow with other gods, polytheism, or without any god at all, the unformed intensities rather than even if it's a loose and supple form that's possible with the liberating potential of polytheism. It doesn't go far enough. Lyotard says something similar in I think it's in the libidinal economy, where he says, he talks about Klosowski and the gods and polytheism, and then he says that we could say that the intensities are theophanies, like epiphanies, but divine, so theophanies. And then he invents a word, he says, but that's already too formatted. Let's take away the theo, and we have phanies. That may sound a little strange, but it's with a PH. P-H-A-N-I-E-S. We have phanies, maybe is a more decent way of saying it. So we have a similar thing here. So there, on the contrary, he's out, in fact, in the mountains under the snow with other gods or no god at all, without family, without father or mother, with nature. What does my father want? Can he give me better? Impossible. Leave me in peace. So Brooks did a good analysis of this passage. In a sense, there's a sort of Occam's razor, existential Occam's razor going out. We can see this cosmic outside as divine, but we now need to postulate a God, creator, behind it all that gives this to me, that doesn't add anything to the cosmic machinic experience. So what can he offer me, or what can a God, the hypothesis of a God, propose that's better or that's more? Nothing. That's the world is enough. So continuing, everything here is the machinic vision, seeing through everything to the machines. Everything to fait machine. Everything makes, everything appears as, everything acts as machines. So the fait is in the place of tout est machine. Everything is a machine, or everything is machines. The fait is, once again, the first verb that we have in the first paragraph is ça fonctionne partout. It functions everywhere. So the fait there is an faire, make or act. So everything acts not like a machine, but as a machine, and everything makes machines as well. So celestial machines, spelling that out, the stars or the rainbow, alpine machines, because he's out in the Alps or the mountains, which couple with the machines of his body. So he's seeing himself, he's seeing the machines behind or in or with or over the things of the world. it's a joyous experience there. One can remember Philip K. Dick locking up and seeing sort of robotic face in the sky, and that was the origin of, I think, the novel The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch. That was an infernal vision. That was a terrifying vision. Here we're getting, we're seeing the machines, and we're seeing the beatifying. So that's the voluptas that we'll get later with the three syntheses. We're getting libido, the connecting force that we saw well set out in paragraph 1. We're getting the libido as numen, which in a reference to the god of religion or the god of the church, and the gods or the no god of the outside. And we're also getting the voluptuousness of the enjoyment, of cosmic enjoyment. So this is a quote from Buchner. He thought that it must be a feeling or a sentiment of infinite beatitude. That's the beatus, the beatitude, the voluptuousness, the enjoyment, the surplus enjoyment, if you want, of this vision, which is more than a vision because lens is part of it, but the vision of the machines. He thought that it must be a feeling of infinite beatitude to be touched by the deep life of every form. So there's a contrast between the deep life and the form. He's seeing through the forms to the deep life, the depth of life, the living depths, which are also machinic depths. To have a soul for the rocks, the metals, the water, and the plants, and to receive in oneself all the objects of nature. That's we say a soul for the rocks, the metals, and the water. Is it one soul for the lot, or is it one soul for each? The syntax there is ambiguous. Maybe that's why Deleuze and Guattari like the translation. It will be interesting to go back to the German and see if there's any ambiguity there. But it could be one soul, like one ring to rule them all. This is one soul to receive them all. Or is it lots of little souls, which would be more consistent with their pluralism, lots of little souls to receive all that. So the relation soul and machine is not a real opposition. I'm saying this because Hillman proposes a polytheism of the soul. And here we're getting a pluralism of the machines, but a favored exemplar is lens and the soul of rocks and metals and water and plants. That's an alchemical soul or set of souls. And it's the microcosm in correspondence and in reception as well. It's probably sort of like radio reception, or it's a two-way reception. Lens is broadcasting as well. So the beatitude of being touched by the deep life of all in any form, of having a soul for rocks, metals, water, plants, of receiving in oneself all the objects of nature. Rêveusement, as in a dream or a reverie. Now, this is one of the few places where Deleuze and Guattari give a positive valorization to the dream. In other places, I don't know if I've noted it down, they talk about the dream as already too Oedipal. And I think they're being unfair there, that the dream and inconsistent. The dream is a machine of machines, and it has Oedipal dimensions, and it has deterritorialized dimensions. And when Guattari gets round to talking concretely about dreams elsewhere, that's the way he discusses them. So anyhow, there may be a sort of polemic, which I don't fully buy into, with surrealism and the idea that the dream may be understood too metaphorically is the royal road to the unconscious. But here, in a literary context, being dreamlike or being in a reverie, what Bernard Stiegler discusses favorably as the diurnal dream as opposed to the nocturnal dream, the waking dream. Anyhow, it's an infinite beatitude. Also, looking at the words infinity is something that a key concept in what is philosophy, and that is later taken up by Badiou in the 3 volumes of Big and Event. So infinity is already in the semantic soil, so to speak. So it's a beatitude to dreamily, in a reverie, take in all the objects of nature as flowers absorb air with the waxing and waning of the moon. So here where Schreber was having a relation to the cosmos via the sun, as a solar relation with penetration via sunbeams. Here, it's a lunar experience of communing, of dialoguing with nature. So, to be a chlorophyllic machine or a machine of photosynthesis, or at least to slide one's body as a piece into such machines. So we're going down, we're doing involution as opposed to evolution. I said in the set of exemplars in the first paragraph, we start with the baby's mouth suckling at the breast. But here, even that is too formalized, formatted. And instead of the mouse breast machine, we're getting a chlorophyllic machine and a photosynthetic machine that one is or can be a part of. Lenz has placed himself or has situated himself. So it's a callback to the se repérer, to localize oneself. Here he's put himself rather, or plunged himself even, has put himself before the man-nature distinction, before all the repérage, the coordinates the this distinction conditions. So an interesting, sometimes etymology is our friend. So promenade, I began with that. Promener is to lead or to drive forward. So there's this projection, what Stigler would call protention. We're not just in retention, remembering the past, we're in protension, driving forward, throwing forward into the future. So that's promenade. Repair. There's nothing etymological at all in what I'm going to say here, but repair, if you cut it down, you have re once again and pair, the father. So when he has to repair himself socially with respect to the father, there's a little play on words that we as readers can make, but not there. But now speaking etymologically, repérage, repérer, it comes from, it does come from re, again, back, and père, or repère at first, and then père is at home. So to repérer something, to have repérage, is to bring them back to a home situation as opposed to an open and perhaps lost situation. So he's before all the landmarks, as well as another translation, before all the coordinates that are the man-nature distinction conditions. He doesn't leave nature, but as a process of production. So we're spelling out what living the cosmos or nature or everything as machines means. It's living them as processes. So there's the verbal process aspect of production, and that's the making aspect. There is neither man nor nature, but uniquely process. It's a singular, although it could have been a plural. There's uniquely process, no article, so it's sort of the general, the universal way of things, process, which produces the one in the other. So man in machine, man in nature, or nature in man, and that couples the machines. One of the things I want to do in this series of talks or analyses or videos is to highlight the dialogical aspect of the whole text of Anti-OEDIPUS. So we've got in this second paragraph the bad dialogue with the pastor who insists on dialogical framework in terms of the God of the church, the mother and the father. And we've got an extended dialogue with nature, so between the machines, whether they're physical or noetic, of Lenz or of the schizophrenic stroller, and the machines of the earth, of nature, of the cosmos. Everywhere it's machines producing, or productive machines, or desiring machines. So in my first video, I argued that desiring machines is good because it's deconstructive, it's deterritorializing, we're seeing everything as machines, and that's the dehumanizing, in the sense of the normative idea of a human being. That's a dehumanizing aspect, but desiring is not enough. Desiring is just one noetic faculty. There's desiring, there's the imagining, there's thinking, and you could say reductively, it's all desire, and it's libidinal energy. So one could say it's all desire, but in fact, that's something that's got to go and that does go. And the model in the first paragraph of What is Philosophy is an arrow made by desiring machines is a sort of limited version or preliminary version of that. Schizophrenic machines, all the generic life. So the generic life is that which is not formatted into pre-established forms and significations. Me and not me, or even ego and non-ego, as le moi is the ego in French, as well as me. Ego and non-ego, exterior and interior, no longer mean anything, which is what we get in the first paragraph of Rhizome, where they say it's no longer important whether we say I or not. It's like using the sentence, the sun rises, when everybody knows that the sun doesn't rise at all. It's the earth that turns. So the sense of the sun rises is machinically that the earth turns. So the sense of I or non-I, exterior and interior. So they are undoing what they, the beginning of the paragraph. I said maybe we could consider the first paragraph all interior, but more surely they begin the second paragraph with a relation to the outside, to the exterior, and exterior and interior no longer mean anything, because they're just preliminary categories covering over the machines. Okay, that's all for today. I hope it helps the dialogue to go forward.